Title: Psychology of People Who Can't Watch Horror Movies. It's just a movie, they say as you're hiding behind a pillow, covering your ears, and seriously considering leaving the room during the opening credits. While your friends are laughing at jump scares and critiquing special effects, you're experiencing genuine physiological terror from fictional monsters that you know aren't real. And everyone acts like you're being dramatic when your nervous system is having a completely legitimate stress response. You're not a coward, you're not overly sensitive. Your brain just processes simulated threat differently than people who enjoy horror. And there are fascinating psychological reasons why some people's minds treat movie monsters like actual predators. Let's start with what's actually happening in your brain when you try to watch a horror movie. Most people can maintain what psychologists call fictional framing. They stay aware that what they're seeing is performance and special effects. But some brains have difficulty maintaining that cognitive distance when faced with realistic threat simulation. Your amygdala, the brain's alarm system, doesn't distinguish between real and fictional danger when the sensory input is convincing enough. Those jump scares, gore effects, and suspenseful music are designed to trigger genuine fear responses, and your nervous system is just doing its job by taking the threat seriously. Psychology identifies this as part of empathy overflow. People who can't handle horror movies often have highly active mirror neuron systems. When you see someone being chased, attacked, or terrorized on screen, your brain doesn't just observe it, it simulates the experience. You're not watching someone run from a killer, you're mentally running from a killer yourself. And here's something fascinating. Research shows that people who avoid horror movies often have what's called high sensory processing sensitivity. About 20% of the population has nervous systems that process sensory input more intensely. The loud noises, sudden movements, and graphic imagery that others find thrilling, you find genuinely overwhelming. But there's something deeper happening here that people don't understand. Horror movies are designed to create controlled trauma responses for entertainment. The physiological stress, elevated heart rate, adrenaline release, hypervigilance is the same whether the threat is real or fictional. Your brain is essentially saying, why are we voluntarily experiencing trauma for fun? Psychology reveals that horror movie enjoyment often correlates with what's called sensation-seeking personality traits. Some people need high-intensity experiences to feel engaged and excited. Others have optimal stimulation levels that are much lower. They're already processing enough complexity in daily life without adding simulated terror. And let's talk about something nobody mentions: the social pressure around horror movies. There's this cultural narrative that avoiding scary movies means you're weak, immature, or missing out on bonding experiences. But why should anyone be required to experience artificial fear for social acceptance? Research from the Journal of Media Psychology shows that people who dislike horror movies often have different relationships with real-world violence and suffering. They might be more affected by news coverage of actual tragedies because their empathy systems don't compartmentalize fictional and real pain as effectively. Here's where it gets interesting. Many people who can't watch horror movies are actually brave in real-life situations. They're often the ones who help during actual emergencies, stand up for others, and face genuine challenges with courage. Their brain just sees no point in practicing fear responses to imaginary threats. There's also this thing about emotional regulation that affects horror movie tolerance. Some people use intense emotions, even negative ones like fear, to feel alive and engaged. Others prefer emotional equilibrium and find artificial fear disruptive to their mental balance. Neither approach is superior, they're just different nervous system preferences. Psychology shows that horror movie aversion often correlates with high imagination and visualization abilities. When you can vividly picture scenarios, horror imagery doesn't stay contained to the movie. It follows you home, invades your dreams, and creates lasting anxiety about situations that reminded you of the film. And here's something beautiful about people who avoid horror movies. They often have rich appreciation for other types of storytelling. While others need extreme stimulation to stay engaged, you can be moved by subtle character development, beautiful cinematography, and complex emotional narratives that don't rely on fear for impact. But let's address what happens when you do try to watch horror movies to fit in socially. Your stress response doesn't care that everyone else is having fun. You're spending the entire experience in fight or flight mode, which is exhausting and potentially harmful. There's no benefit to forcing yourself through artificial trauma for social acceptance. Research reveals that people who can't handle horror movies often have what's called thin boundaries between different states of consciousness. They're more affected by dreams, more sensitive to environmental changes, and more likely to be influenced by others' emotions. Horror imagery penetrates deeper and lasts longer. And here's something that might surprise you. Many horror movie avoiders are actually highly analytical about fear. They understand exactly why certain techniques are designed to scare people, which makes the manipulation feel obvious rather than entertaining. Once you see the mechanics of how fear is manufactured, it's hard to enjoy the experience. There's also a values component that people don't discuss. Some individuals don't enjoy entertainment that celebrates violence, suffering, or psychological torture, even in fictional contexts. Their avoidance isn't about fear, it's about preferring media that aligns with their values around human dignity and well-being. Psychology shows that horror movie preferences often relate to how people process uncertainty and unpredictability. Horror films are built on not knowing what will happen next, when the next scare will come, or how characters will suffer. For people who prefer predictability and control, this uncertainty feels stressful rather than exciting. Research from Dr. Justin Feinstein at the University of Iowa reveals something fascinating about fear processing. People who avoid horror movies often have more active insular regions, the brain areas responsible for interoception or awareness of internal bodily states. This means you're more conscious of your heart rate increasing, your breathing changing, and your muscle tension rising, making the physical fear response impossible to ignore. And let's be honest about what horror movies actually offer. The adrenaline rush, the group bonding through shared fear, the relief when the movie ends. These are real benefits for people whose nervous systems enjoy intense stimulation. But if your system doesn't operate that way, you're not missing essential human experiences by skipping scary movies. Studies by Dr. Glenn Sparks at Purdue University show that horror movie avoidance often correlates with what's called death anxiety, not fear of dying, but deeper philosophical discomfort with mortality themes. Horror films often explore death, violence, and human vulnerability in ways that can trigger existential anxiety in people who prefer not to confront these themes as entertainment. Here's what people miss when they judge horror movie avoiders. You're not lacking courage or adventure. You're just selective about which experiences deserve your emotional energy. You'd rather be moved by beauty, inspired by creativity, or challenged by complex ideas than artificially terrorized for entertainment. And here's something that neuroscientist Dr. Kevin Labar's research at Duke University reveals. People who avoid horror movies often have stronger prefrontal cortex regulation over their amygdala responses. This means you're not too sensitive. You actually have more conscious control over your emotional reactions, which makes you more aware when entertainment is trying to manipulate your fear centers artificially. So the next time someone insists you just try watching this one, it's not that scary, or suggests you're missing out on cultural bonding experiences, remember this: your brain is protecting something valuable. Whether it's emotional equilibrium, empathic sensitivity, or just peace of mind, your horror movie avoidance might be wisdom disguised as squeamishness. You don't need to develop a tolerance for artificial fear. You need friends who understand that there are countless ways to bond over movies that don't require anyone to experience simulated trauma. Are you someone who can't handle horror movies, or do you love being scared? What do you think drives these different responses to fictional fear? Let me know, because I suspect there are more people out there who'd rather watch literally anything else than the latest horror release. To get more psychology content like this in your feed, please subscribe, hit the like button, and share your experiences with us. You'll be supporting our efforts too. Thanks for watching.